القصة هي قصة الحياة السياسية.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Interior Minister Nahad al-Mashnouk orders top security officials to protect tomorrow's planned anti-government protest during a meeting at the Interior Ministry. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says the waste crisis is the cabinet's priority issue, and ministers will reconvene upon his return from the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has to go, but the timing of his departure has yet to be negotiated. Interior Minister Nahad al-Mashnouk has ordered top security officials to protect Sunday's planned anti-government protest by preventing riots from breaking out. During a security meeting he chaired at his office, Mashnouk said demonstrations and freedom of expression were rights guaranteed by the Lebanese constitution, but he underlined that any act of public freedom shouldn't undermine security, risk the safety of security personnel in charge of protecting rallies, or vandalize public and private property. The meeting was attended by Internal Security Forces Chief Major General Ibrahim Basbouz and Beirut Police Chief Brigadier General Mohammed Ayoubi. Activists have called for a mass march from Bush Hamoud to Nejmi Square on Sunday at 5 p.m. to demand the resignation of Mashnouk, following the use of excessive force by police against protesters during a demonstration on Wednesday, but Mashnouk rejected any calls for his resignation. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says he will reconvene the cabinet after he returns from New York City, where he will attend the 70th session of the UN General Assembly. The opening of the 70th session took place on September 15th, and Salam will address the General Assembly on September 26th. His speech is expected to include an overview of Lebanon's current domestic situation. Speaking after a meeting with Speaker Nabih Berri in Ain Tine, Salam said the cabinet was not paralyzed, and the ongoing coordination with Berri was one of the factors helping the government to overcome the crisis. Salam said the garbage crisis was a priority issue and noted that the plan of Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib was being closely followed. He said he hopes the implementation of the plan would diffuse tensions after it ignited a series of anti-government protests organized by the U-Stink movements and other civil society groups. Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun is expected to announce an important stance from the controversial military and security appointments tomorrow and his possible boycott of the national dialogue. Aoun is set to give a speech during a ceremony that will be held on the occasion of handing over the Free Patriotic Movement leadership to his son-in-law, Foreign Affairs Minister Gebran Bassil. Aoun has rejected the extensions of the terms of high-ranking army and security officials, calling for the appointment of new officials. The issue has caused huge differences among cabinet members. The FPM leader also called for direct elections to resolve Lebanon's presidential deadlock. He voiced pessimism regarding the national dialogue session's progress, as he said most political factions have different views in evaluating the crisis and coming up with solutions. Health Minister Wael Abu Fahoud has announced the closure of a Beirut branch of Safe Beauty Clinic for failing to meet health requirements and lacking specialists. Earlier this year, he addressed a request by the South Lebanon governor to shut down 3 plastic surgery clinics. The minister recommended shutting down the clinics for a renewable 2-week period, and his decision was based on a report by the ministry's health department in Sidon. The targeted clinics were Jay Nassar Center, Safe Beauty Clinic, and Silkor, all in Sidon. The statement said the reasons for closing the centers included the lack of licenses or the absence of full-time specialized doctors working in the establishments. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has to go, but the timing of his departure had to be decided through negotiations. Speaking after talks with British Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond, he called on Russia and Iran to use their influence to convince Assad to negotiate. He said there was an urgency to renewing efforts to find a political settlement to end the 4-year war and the worsening refugee crisis in Syria. Kerry also said the U.S. was planning direct talks between Russian and American military officials over Russia's growing involvement in Syria. The announcement came days after the idea was broached by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in a phone call with Kerry.
The President believes that mill-to-mill conversation is an important next step, and I think hopefully it will take place very shortly, and it will help to define some of the different options that are available to us as we consider next steps in Syria. Obviously, our focus remains on destroying ISIL and also on a political settlement with respect to Syria, which we believe cannot be achieved with the long-term presence of Assad. But we're looking for ways in which to try to find the common ground. Clearly, if you're going to have a political settlement, which we've always argued is the best and only way to resolve Syria, you need to have conversations with people, and you need to find the common ground. That's precisely the heart of my conversations here with His Highness and Sheikh Abdullah, and then further conversations with my counterparts, Foreign Secretary Hammond tomorrow, with Foreign Minister Steinmeier in Germany, and other conversations that we're having on the side. So our hope is to find a diplomatic way forward, but this crisis has to be solved. I think everybody is seized by the urgency. We have been all along, but the migration levels, the continued destruction, the danger of potential augmentation by any unilateral moves really puts a high premium on diplomacy at this moment. And that's why I'm here, and that's what we're going to work on.
And coming up next, Japan's parliament passes a controversial law allowing its troops to fight abroad. More details next. Welcome back. Dubai has announced a 3-day mourning period after the 33-year-old son of the Gulf Emirates ruler passed away. Reports say Sheikh Rashid, son of the Prime Minister and Vice President of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, suffered a heart attack this morning. Sheikh Rashid was the eldest son of Sheikh Mohammed. Rashid's brother, Sheikh Hamdan, is the Crown Prince of Dubai. The Israeli Air Force has launched three airstrikes in the northern Gaza Strip last night, shortly after Gaza militants fired 2 rockets towards the Israeli cities of Sderot and Ashkelon. Video filmed this morning showed a telecommunications antenna at a Hamas camp in the northern Gaza Strip that had been destroyed as a result of the airstrikes. No casualties were reported. Israeli emergency teams rushed to the site in Sderot, where a rocket fired from Gaza exploded last night. The missile damaged a bus and a house, but nobody was reported hurt. Gaza militants later fired another rocket near Ashkelon that was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome rocket defense system. The Omani ambassador's home in the Yemeni capital Sana'a has come under fire during continued bombardment of the country. This is according to the Omani Foreign Ministry, which did not offer any details of the incident the previous day, but condemned the attack and described it as a clear violation of international law. The developments in Sana'a came as the Saudi-led coalition launched over a dozen airstrikes over Houthi-held sites in the city, killing 29 people, including civilians. The airstrikes reportedly hit an apartment building in the center of the capital, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, killing a family of 9. 1 more civilian was killed, and the search for more that may be buried under rubble is ongoing. Slovenia started letting migrants into the country at a land border crossing with Croatia, where hundreds crowded an entry point into Slovenia. Migrants who began to congregate at the border crossing near the Croatian village of Harmika formed a crowd, some of whom pushed against Slovenian riot police guarding the entry point. But migrants were not allowed to enter Hungary. Many had already traveled hundreds of kilometers, risking their lives in the Mediterranean. They looked for another route into Europe, a route through neighboring Croatia.
A gate closed, a journey blocked. This was Horgos on the Serb-Hungarian border. The Hungarians were allowing very few refugees or migrants to enter their country. These people had already traveled hundreds of kilometers, had risked their lives in the Mediterranean. Now they looked for another route into Europe, a route through neighboring Croatia. Thousands of others had arrived in Tovarnik, just inside Croatia, in the previous 24 hours. They waited, spent and frustrated, hours in the sun, for trains to take them further into Croatia. The police worked hard to keep order. Volunteers handed out water and food. Ayman, a Syrian, was grateful for the help.
It's the most of different for me without my family. My family in Syria in the war. The good is here. The policeman help us.
Finally, buses to take the waiting people further. Families with children were allowed on first, but hundreds pressed forward, pushing and shoving, fearful that they would be left behind. Croatian police tried to stem the flow. They failed. The crowd surged past them, through them. In Croatia, at the end of the day, they marched on, hoping one day soon to reach the rest of the European Union.
Cuban President Raúl Castro and U.S. President Barack Obama spoke by telephone about Pope Francis's visit to both countries starting today and new regulations relaxing Washington's trade embargo on the island. Cuba's government said the two leaders also talked about recently restored diplomatic relations between the former Cold War enemies and the upcoming UN General Assembly, where both leaders are due to speak on September 28th. The Pope played a crucial role in facilitating secret talks between Cuba and the United States, including letters he sent to both Castro and Obama in 2014 that led to this year's re-establishment of diplomatic relations. Moving on to Japan, Parliament has passed a law allowing its military to fight on foreign soil for the first time since World War II. The upper house of the Japanese parliament passed a law on Saturday, despite fierce attempts by opposition politicians to block the move. The approval makes the legislation into law, loosening post-World War II constraints on the use of force by the military to its own self-defense only. The legislation, passed by the more powerful lower house in July, sparked sizable protests and debate about whether the nation should shift away from its pacifist ways to face growing security challenges. The motion, backed by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's ruling coalition, passed following days of heated debate that, at times, descended into scuffles and shouting matches between parliament members. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk orders top security officials to protect Sunday's planned anti-government protest during a meeting at the Interior Ministry. Prime Minister Tamam Slam says the waste crisis is the cabinet's priority, and ministers will reconvene upon his return from the UN General Assembly meeting in New York City. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has to go, but the timing of his departure has yet to be negotiated. Those are your top stories for this Saturday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I wish you all a very nice weekend.
القصة هي قصة الملحيات السياسية.